Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Tider Insider TV, brought to you each and every week by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. You see our beautiful tumblers right here, and Don Staley and his group do a great job of promoting sports and tourism in West Alabama, and we're thrilled that they're part of Tider Insider TV. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. Rodney, you ready to go?
I'm ready.
We're jam-packed. Brad Edwards coming up in the next segment, but right now we're talking Bama football, ready to play Miami in just 18 days from now at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. That's right, football is back. The Crimson Tide on Saturday had a scrimmage, but today they held their 12th fall practice at the Thomas Drew Fields. But this past weekend, as we said, scrimmage number 1 at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And again, no media allowed inside, no public viewing, just some family members, some former players, maybe a few donors, but for the most part it was a closed scrimmage, and so getting information, quite frankly, is very difficult to do. But Bryce Young, we heard, threw for 3 touchdowns, one of which was to running back Trey Sanders. Nice to see Sanders coming back from that automobile accident back last fall that ended his 2020 season and put in doubt, according to some, whether or not he'd be able to play this year. But Paul Tyson threw for 1 touchdown, and Kendall Randolph had to leave, the starting right tackle, with an ankle injury. A couple offensive linemen. We think Chris Owens and Evan Neal both sat out, so it was a little bit tough on the offense against that Alabama defense that is so talented. But we saw some of the wide receivers flash, Rodney, and the players talking about building chemistry now on this football team. Here's Slade Bolden.
You're starting to see it throughout practice, throughout the scrimmages, that we're starting to get dialed into that chemistry, and I think it's only going to improve as we continue to practice and continue to scrimmage throughout fall camp.
All right, Rodney, you didn't get to see any of the scrimmage. I didn't get to see any of the scrimmage. We haven't seen any video from it, but you've talked to a lot of people. You've got some sources. We had some people that had some insight into it. Just what did you hear from scrimmage number 1? What left you most encouraged, and maybe some things that you heard that have you concerned?
Well, I think what's really encouraging, Gary, at this time of the year, you want your defense to be ahead of the offense. If not, you might have some issues. And considering all the discussion we've had about how this defense could be one of the best, if not the best, Alabama defense since 2016, sounds like they performed extremely well. Again, you mentioned 3 offensive linemen out, certainly made it very difficult for the offense. You've got a lot of young players on the offensive side of the ball. We've talked about all of those, and new quarterbacks, a couple of, well, in this case, several new offensive linemen in the scrimmage, new receivers. You've got Bill O'Brien now, of course, as new offensive coordinator, 3 other new offensive assistants. So it's kind of a work in progress on that offensive side, but they have a lot of talent, Gary. I still think as time goes along, that offense will develop really well.
Yeah, and they're going up against a defense that going into the season might be one of the best groups in the country on that side of the ball. So when you look at the offense, the quarterback's obviously the focus, but a lot of questions about the receiving core. You lose Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner. You lose Jalen Waddle, although he did get hurt last year. You lose Miller Forrestall, who's a dependable tight end. So you got Slade Bolden, who's a veteran. You got Jamison Williams coming over the transfer from Ohio State. But after that, you got a lot of guys that are unproven, that haven't played very much football, in some cases true freshmen.
Yeah, you've got a lot of potential there, certainly. Some of the young players, we know that Trayshawn Holden is certainly a guy that's a very talented player. We saw him in spring. Ajay Hall is a guy, another one that's very talented. There's Javon Baker, number 5. He had a fabulous catch in the scrimmage. There's Christian Leary, a speedster out of Florida, slot receiver, 500-meter guy. You've got several others. Gary, JoJo Earl had a big day. We understand, the slot receiver from Texas. So you kind of get the drift. There is a lot of talent, but as you mentioned, a lot of inexperience as well.
And after practicing all week, Alabama will scrimmage again on Saturday afternoon at Bryant-Denny Stadium. By the way, Bryce Young is scheduled to talk to the media on a Zoom call Thursday. I think that's another indicator that he is more than likely, I'd say 99.9% or even 100%, going to be the starting quarterback against Miami.
Yeah, I think it would be a shock, Gary, to anyone. Right now, he's certainly been the #1 guy all along, I think, certainly since spring. But Paul Tyson making some improvement, and the true freshman Jalen Milroe is extraordinarily gifted athletically.
All right, time now for Coach Talk. Following Saturday's scrimmage, Alabama head football coach Nick Saban was asked about depth along the defensive line. His response, Well, it's positive if you're an Alabama fan. He says he thinks this rotation can go 8 or 9 deep.
With Will and Chris Allen, you know, those two guys can play sort of defensive end, especially in nickel situations. Gives us a little more athleticism, a little more pass rush. But, you know, we've got 7 or 8 guys that have all, you know, sort of rotated in there with the 1s and the 2s and back and forth.
And Rodney, Alabama returns a lot of experience along that defensive front, including DJ Jail, Justin Avoybe, Fedarian Mathis, Tim Smith, Byron Young. They got some newcomers that are highly thought of. And we hope that in the near future they have LeBron Ray back. The only thing that's held this guy back has been his health. He has had injury issues since he's been at Alabama, but his talent, if he can get well, that's a guy that isn't even factoring in this at this point, who has first-round draft talent in terms of what he could be at the next level.
Definitely. I mean, he was a 5-star player coming out of high school, Gary. Like you said, he's had a variety of injuries, a lot of foot issues, and now we know that there was a groin injury that sidelined him here in camp. But, you know, the latest I've heard is it's not as significant, perhaps, as what it was initially thought. So we may see LeBron Ray back out there, you know, fairly soon, and, you know, certainly hope so because, as you mentioned, he could be a difference maker up front.
All right, Rod, the talent on the Alabama roster is second to none in the country, and Nick Saban and that coaching staff continues to work to make sure that the talent stays that way for years to come. Another commitment for the Crimson Tide yesterday, 6'1", 192-pound safety Jake Pope out of Buford, Georgia, committing to the Crimson Tide over Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Ohio State and Georgia. Now, this is a guy, maybe he doesn't have all the stars, and we know how Bama fans are about their stars, but terrific athlete, plays on both sides of the ball, projects on defense in college, but might, he said, would be interested in playing some offense too. His dad was a safety at Clemson, but kind of role reversal. When Kevin Turner's son Nolan wound up going to Clemson, Brad Pope's son Jake coming to Alabama to play for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I like Jake Pope. You talk about, and we've mentioned this, Gary, I think the ratings are going to change considerably because a lot of these players haven't been evaluated by a lot of these networks that do the rankings, and I really think Jake Pope, some already have him a 4-star. I think he moves up. You know, very talented. You mentioned he's a two-way player in high school. You know, just a great tackler, great instincts for the game. You talk about the bloodlines. I always think that's important. Look at him. Look at those ball skills, the ability to go up and make plays. And here's the thing I really like about him, too. He plays in a program, tradition-rich program, a lot of history, a lot of championships, and he's, as they say, he's been coached hard, and I don't think this will be a shock to him when he gets to Alabama.
Yeah, they won the state championship last season. Real quick word on Le'Veon Moss, the running back out of Baton Rouge, committed to Alabama, but is decommitted. It looks like he's going to wind up elsewhere.
Yeah, again, he's an outstanding back, Gary, but Texas A&M, LSU recruiting him extremely hard, and I think Alabama still, if they decide to take another running back, of course they have 5-star Emmanuel Henderson committed already. If they decide to take another one, I think there's some other ones out there that are certainly interesting.
All right, still to come on Tider Insider TV, we'll be joined by former ESPN college football analyst and statistical guru Brad Edwards in studio to discuss his new book, Dynasty by the Numbers. You're going to want to stay tuned for this. Also, how about this? Alabama, #1 again in the Associated Press preseason poll. We will have more on that on the other side of the break. And also, we'll eventually get to your phone calls, your emails, and your tweets. The phone number, as always, 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. You can email us at the address on your screen or tweet at us using that hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. The award-winning Tider Insider TV will return right after this. Here we go. Alabama, like in the coaches poll, #1 in the Associated Press Top 25 preseason media poll for the 4th time in the past 6 seasons. Bama's the defending national champion. The Tide got 47 of 63 first-place votes from sports writers and broadcasters who vote in the poll. Oklahoma is #2 with 6 first-place votes, just ahead of #3 Clemson. Ohio State and Georgia round out the top 5. The Big Ten, SEC, and Pac-12 each have 5 teams in the top 25. The ACC and Big 12 have 3. And welcome back into TITV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports, alongside Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris, and to my far right is Brad Edwards, 20-plus years at ESPN as an analyst and statistical guru. No longer with the worldwide leader, but he joins us tonight to talk about a phenomenal book. And, I mean, I have been waiting to get my hands on this. Dynasty by the Numbers, Why Alabama Now Owns the Greatest Decade-Plus Run in College Football History. You see the cover, you see the rings. Brad, thanks for joining us.
Oh, happy to be here.
Interesting. You're an Alabama grad. You plan to walk on as a kicker. That didn't happen for you, but you were in the sports information department, and that eventually led you to ESPN. But when you got ready to do this book, there are a lot of books on Alabama's championships. There's one that comes out or more every time Alabama wins one. But you being a stat guy, you didn't want this to be my opinion. You didn't want this to be folklore or a battle between fan bases. You wanted to have statistical data to back up why this is the greatest 10-year-plus dynasty in the history of college football.
Yeah, just the facts. And that was what it was all about. And to tell you the truth, after the 2017 season, I knew there was enough there to write a book. And that was when I first started thinking about it. And, of course, we all know what happened the 3 seasons since, which is that the Alabama offense, which had been good but not great, all of a sudden exploded. And so now you have these great offensive numbers to go with all the incredible defensive numbers that had been there before it. And my initial goal for the book was to show how big the gap was between Alabama and everyone else in the sport over the last 12 or 13 years. And there are a lot of things in the book that are going to show that to you. There are a lot of charts and graphs, so you can just glance at the page and it jumps out at you how big that gap is. But in the process of compiling it, I started to realize that this is unlike anything that anyone in the sport has ever done in over 150 years of college football being played.
And it's being done in a time where everything is geared supposedly toward parity and rule changes that have been put in place to try to keep one team from dominating college football. Nothing against what Coach Bryant did or any of the other great coaches of the past, but you could argue just on where we're at in time, period.
Yeah.
Just the time, the era for Nick Saban to do this.
And the changes that have occurred during the Saban era. You look at all the numbers, and they're really impressive. But one thing the numbers don't really capture is that he had to change his philosophy on offense. He had to change his philosophy on defense. He had to change the way he recruited to some extent with the early signing period coming around. And so he's had to make all these adjustments. And unlike almost every other great coach in the history of the sport, it didn't take a 7-4 season for him to realize, I've got a problem, I need to change this. For Saban, often it's a scare. We almost lost that game. We need to change something, and that's why he's been so good for so long.
Yeah, Brad, I was mentioning to you before we came on that, most of these great dynasties, you look at them through the years, 7 or 8 years, and then they're done. And Coach Bryant obviously dominated the 60s and the 70s, but he had 69 and 70 where they barely broke 500. And you look at Nick Saban now, what have they had, 3, 4 seasons with 2 losses? You had, 08, 13, 14, and 19. Other than that, I mean, and as Gary's mentioned many times, almost basically every year except 2010 going into November or late November, they've been in the national championship.
Yeah, and I think I have a note in the book that off the top of my head, I believe it is 173 of the 180 games that they played. It's 96%. Of the games they played since the start of the 2008 season, they were a national championship contender when they took the field.
Wow.
It is unreal when you stop and think about it. And that's another thing about this book. Alabama fans, understandably, have become spoiled. And they expect this now. I mean, you look at what they lost from last year to this year, and they still expect the team to contend for the national title, and they probably will.
Yeah.
But this isn't normal.
No.
And at some point, it's going to end, and Alabama will have an 8-4 season. I know that people just shudder to think about that. And if you're able to pull this book off the shelf, you'll be able to look back on this and realize how absolutely incredible everything you witnessed for all that time was.
There you get a good look at the book. And just the different times he's been counted out. Like you said, going to the RPOs and the way they've changed the game. I still think Brad, he'd rather just line up in a phone booth and play 60 plays a game and just
That's what he'd prefer to do.
But he made the adjustment because he had to. All right, tell us how folks can get their hands on it. I know you've got an online store, and it's going to be available here soon in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, so online, the only place you can get it is not on Amazon. You can only get it at my website, BamaDynastyBook.com. And so that's where you need to go if you want to get it now. If you haven't done that and you happen to be on campus for a game later this season, sometime in the very near future, both the Soup Store and the Bryant Museum will have it on their shelves. But those are the only places that will have it on shelves. So only a few places where you can get it, so be able to look for it in those spots.
Yeah, you saw it on your screen. Jot that down, and believe me, if you're an Alabama football fan, you're going to want to get this. Or maybe if you're an Alabama football hater, you're going to want to get it.
If you got a lot of money, buy a bunch of them, give them to all your Auburn friends. Show them what they could have been.
We could go on and do a whole show. By the way, Brad is going to be with me in the morning at 10:30 on my radio show on Tide 100.9 FM, so we'll go into even more depth on this great book. Thank you, Brad.
You got it.
And still to come on Tider Insider TV, former Alabama basketball player Herb Jones signed his rookie deal with the New Orleans Pelicans, and it's one of the best rookie deals a second-round draft pick has ever signed. And up next, your phone calls, emails, and tweets. We want to hear from Tider Insider Nation. 205-348-9882 is the number. Thanks again to Brad Edwards for joining us to talk about Dynasty by the Numbers, why Alabama now owns the greatest decade-plus run in college football history. We'll be back after this. Former Bama basketball star Herbert Jones signed the second largest contract ever by a player who was drafted in the second round of the NBA draft. Jones signed the 3-year deal, $5.4 million with the New Orleans Pelicans on Monday. Herb has shined in NBA Summer League play, showing his versatility across the Pelicans' 4 games. The Greensboro native is averaging 7.8 points, 3.8 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 1.8 steals, and 1.3 blocks in 21-plus minutes. He does a little bit of everything. What a ball player. So happy for him to be signing that NBA contract that pretty much guarantees him a spot on the 15-man roster next season. All right, Rod, let's jump out on the Tider Insider Hotline and welcome in our pal Johnny from over in Bessemer. Hey, man, what's up?
Gary, what's going on, man?
Oh, you know it, pal.
Hey, man, I'm trying to find out how many walk-ons can we sign, and I wondered about the team. Are we going to have a better team we was last year? Later, dude.
All right, John, listen, we don't know for sure what the numbers are like. Coach Saban has a way of working that out. There at 14 commits. My math, I was looking at it the other night, Rod. The way I calculated, I think they could sign about 22 or 23, but it wouldn't surprise me if they're able to eventually wind up signing more than that.
Yeah, and again, I'm like you, Gary. I don't think anybody really knows exactly how many. Obviously, Nick Saban, but yeah, John. Listen, I don't know exactly. Generally, we have a pretty good idea. They're going to sign at least 25. But this year, it's possible, as Gary said, they could sign a few less.
And as far as will they be better than last year, they were perfect last year. I guess technically they went 13-0. If you went 15-0 this year, I guess you could say you could be better. But I tell you this, that last year's team was special. And it was a really special team. But I think this team has potential to win another national championship. Will it? We'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've got a difficult schedule. You start with Miami. You've got to go on the road with a young offense, a young quarterback down to Gainesville.
Yeah, College Station.
Yeah, it's going to be tough in that third game or so going down to Florida. So, and then College Station a little bit later. So it's a tough road.
All right, let's get to a tweet. This is from our pal Go Lion Stan. Coach Saban says the DL has 8 or 9 guys that can contribute, plus Allen and Anderson. Which young defensive line will make an impact, Rodney?
Which young?
Yeah, it's a lot of. Might be several, right?
Yeah. Well, let me say this. When you've got Justin Eboigbe, DJ Dell, Byron Young, Fedarian Mathis, perhaps LaBryan Ray, you've got Tim Smith, Jamil Burrows. I'm going to tell you a guy to watch out for. Jamarian Latham, the local area West Alabama kid.
Pickens County.
Yes.
Played for Michael Williams.
Yes, I think he can be a disruptor. I think he's going to be in that rotation Coach Saban was talking about. If you want to call him young, we'll call him young. But I think he's really good. As far as the true freshmen, look, they may get some opportunities. But right now, I think you look at the group that they have, it's pretty good.
All right. Thanks for the phone calls and emails. We got more of them to come. Phone lines are open, 205-348-9882. Give us a call right now. We'll be right back with TITV after this commercial message. And we're back on TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. We're brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Let's go back out to the Tider Insider Hotline, and Wolfgang in Northport is with us. Hey, Wolfgang, what's up, man?
What's happening? A long time.
Yeah, pal. Good to hear from you.
It's Wolfgang in Northport. I want to say, but the teams don't have to worry about Alabama offense. That's what they more geared to it this year, based on the last few years. But this year, it's going to be total defense. They're gonna have to worry about not only getting in the end zone, but getting a first down. Based on the defensive coordinator, it's 3.2 yards. It's gonna be way less than that. They're gonna have to worry about getting a first down.
Well, Wolfgang, I think the defense is going to be very good. Now, what you just said would make them one of the most dominant defenses of all time. But, Rodney, they do have a chance to be good. Now, like we always say, because it's the truth, you got to go out on the field and prove it. Potential, it sounds good. Looking at a roster on paper, a defensive lineup in paper, but you got to go out and face some high-powered offenses beginning in that first game with Miami.
Yeah, and things are different now. You mentioned that. You've got quarterbacks. D'Eriq King in that first game. I mean, he's going to be a real challenge, Wolfgang. This guy's really versatile, can throw the football, very elusive. You know, he kind of reminds some people of Kyler Murray. He's that kind of player.
Yeah.
But I tell you what I really like about this defense, that I agree with him. I think not only are they very talented, I sense it's going to have a lot of chemistry. When you look at the players, some of the veteran players that they have, you look in the secondary, you've got Jordan Battle. Josh Job's been around a while. I really like the addition of Henry To'oTo'o. I think he's a leader. I think he's a natural signal caller there. And I like Christian Harris, Jalen Moody also competing. They've got some guys, veterans up front, that have now been playing for 3 years. Fadarian Mathis is a guy I think is going to be a leader up front. Byron Young, and we've mentioned several of them already. But so I really think the experience and the leadership now is switching this year from offense to defense. And so I agree with you, Wolfgang. I think this is going to be a really good defense.
All right, we had a couple more emails that we could not get to. We'll get to them next week, but we'll come back and wrap up this edition of TITV on a beautiful evening in the City of Champions right after this. Alabama soccer opens the season this Thursday evening at 7 o'clock at home against Jacksonville State. And Alabama head coach Wes Hart excited about this team. Hey, great news, too. All of the soccer matches don't cost you anything. So get out there on Thursday night and support them in their season opener against the Jacksonville State Gamecocks. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Tider Insider TV. A reminder that if you missed any of the program, you can catch a replay tonight at 10:30, or you can catch it anytime at WVUA23.com. This edition of Tider Insider TV has been brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. We'll catch you again next week on TITV. Have a great night, everybody.